Personal Stories. Narcotics Anonymous has grown a great deal since 1953. The people who started this fellowship, and for whom we have a deep and lasting affection, have taught us much about addiction and recovery. In the following pages, we offer you our beginnings. The first section was written in 1965 by one of our earliest members. More recent stories of NA members' recovery can be found in our basic text, Narcotics Anonymous. We do recover. Although politics makes strange bedfellows, as the old saying goes, addiction makes us one of a kind. Our personal stories may vary in individual pattern, but in the end, we all have the same thing in common. This common illness or disorder is addiction. We know well the two things that make up true addiction: obsession and compulsion. Obsession, that fixed idea that takes us back time and time again to our particular drug or some substitute to recapture the ease and comfort we once knew. Compulsion, once having started the process with one fix, one pill, or one drink, we cannot stop through our own power of will. Because of our physical sensitivity to drugs, we are completely in the grip of a destructive power greater than ourselves. When at the end of the road we find that we can no longer function as human beings, either with or without drugs, we all face the same dilemma. What is there left to do? There seems to be this alternative: either go on as best we can to the bitter ends, jails, institutions, or death, or find a new way to live. In years gone by, very few addicts ever had this last choice. Those who are addicted today are more fortunate. For the first time in man's entire history, a simple way has been proving itself in the lives of many addicts. It is available to us all. This is a simple spiritual, not religious program, known as Narcotics Anonymous. When my addiction brought me to the point of complete powerlessness, uselessness, and surrender some 15 years ago, there was no NA. I found AA, and in that fellowship met addicts who had also found that program to be the answer to their problem. However, we knew that many were still going down the road of disillusion, degradation, and death because they were unable to identify with the alcoholic in AA. Their identification was at the level of apparent symptoms and not at the deeper level of emotions or feelings, where empathy becomes a healing therapy for all addicted people. With several other addicts and some members of AA who had great faith in us and in the program, we formed, in July of 1953, what we now know as Narcotics Anonymous. We felt that now the addict would find from the start as much identification as each needed to convince himself that he could stay clean by the example of others who had recovered for many years. That this was what was principally needed has proved itself in these passing years. That wordless language of recognition, belief, and faith, which we call empathy, created the atmosphere in which we could feel time, touch reality, and recognize spiritual values long lost to many of us. In our program of recovery, we are growing in numbers and in strength. Never before have so many clean addicts of their own choice and in free society been able to meet where they please, to maintain their recovery in complete creative freedom. Even addicts said it could not be done the way we had it planned. We believed in openly scheduled meetings, no more hiding as other groups had tried. We believed this differed from all other methods tried before by those who advocated long withdrawal from society. We felt that the sooner the addict could face his problem in everyday living, just that much faster would he become a real, productive citizen. We eventually have to stand on our own feet and face life on its own terms. So why not from the start? Because of this, of course, many relapsed and many were lost completely. However, many stayed, and some came back after their setback. The brighter part is the fact that of those who are now our members, many have long terms of complete abstinence and are better able to help the newcomer. Their attitude, based on the spiritual values of our steps and traditions, is the dynamic force that is bringing increase and unity to our program. Now we know that the time has come when that tired old lie, once an addict, always an addict, will no longer be tolerated by either society or the addict himself. We do recover. 1/3 of my life. Today has been one of those days. It was Friday and Monday all together. Trying to get something done was like trying to make a connection when the heat was on. It was a panic all day, but when I got home and lay down for an hour, it felt good. I can go on a natural nod, because I have nothing up here now but a clear conscience. The old hassle is gone. I can lie down, take it easy, and be comfortable. The longer I stay clean, the better it gets for me. It's real groovy to get up in the morning and not care whether it's foggy or the sun's shining, just so long as I'm clean. No cramps and no sweats now. I remember the times when I'd be afraid to go to sleep, because I had a get-up there on the dresser. But if I took my get-up, I'd have nothing when I got up, and then I'd be sick again. I never thought I'd feel good about being out here with the squares, but now I think sometimes I feel the same things they do. I don't have all those petty little things going through my mind now like I did when I thought I was hip, so slick. The only one I was being hip and slick with was me. Everybody else could see right through me. I don't have a running nose anymore, and no itchiness, unless it's an allergy or something. I can go home now at night to clean sheets and blankets, say my little prayers, and go to sleep. It's real good for me. Yesterday was payday. I went out and bought myself a few presents. Not Christmas shopping, you know. Now I can go through these stores without even a temptation to steal. This is my third Christmas on the bricks, and I can't think of anything I've stolen since I've been out of the joint. I feel that I was basically honest from childhood. I stole to keep up my habit, to get my stuff, to keep my head on my chest, to keep my stomach from grinding, and to keep my nose from running. That nose, it was always running, whether I was sick or not. My story is similar to many others. I hit one nut house when I was 13. I really don't remember much about it. That was on an OD of amphetamines. They thought I was a manic depressive, till I cleaned up off the pills, and then they figured I was just a neurotic. It progressed, though. I started to make the joints. I'm 30 now, and there's 12 and a half years gone out of my life like this. Man, I sure don't want any more of it. Since I've been out of the joint about 3 years, I can't say I haven't had the temptation. I can't say I haven't had some obsession. I can't say I haven't had the passing thought of wanting to use, because I have at times. Now, however, it's like the passing thought of, there's a real nice car there. I'd like one like that. And then it's gone, and so is the thought. I notice that the times and the periods are getting farther apart when they happen. I haven't had a driving obsession to get my head on my chest for over 2 years now, and this is really something. I now try to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. Sometimes I like to try to play God and run everything, but it doesn't work that way. The longer I stay around and stay clean, the groovier it gets. The last time I came out, I was a scared, sniveling little snot, double hip, double slick, still walking that walk and talking that talk. Now I go back to the institutions every week I can make it. I went back to my home group a while back, and it was greater than my birthday. You know, those guys accepted me back and were glad to see me. I gave a lot of them a hard time with the attitudes I used to have. At that time, nothing was any good. Everything was rotten except dope. Sure, I had a craving for drugs, but at that time I was ready for anything that would get my feet off the ground. Now, however, I know that anything that would get my feet off the ground, that isn't an airplane, will head me for real trouble. I sincerely believe this. I don't know if I work the 12 steps to the best of my ability or not, but I do know I've been clean about 3 years by practicing them the best I can. When things start bugging me now, I know where most of the trouble lies. Me. Now I find I have a greater tolerance for people and a lot more patience all around. This is a big change for me. Practicing the principles of this program the way I understand them, staying clean a day at a time, sharing experiences with other addicts who are new to the program, these actions have changed my whole outlook on life. It's a good way to live. I can't do any more time. I came to the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous as an addict, out of an institution for women. I came the first night I got out, and it's been here that I've learned how to live, so that it hasn't been necessary for me to use any kind of drugs in my daily life. It has been here that I've learned a lot about myself, because we addicts are so very much alike. I've always seen another side of myself whenever problems and suggested solutions have been discussed at our meetings. I have learned from those who are following the program of recovery to the best of their ability how I can do the same if I am willing to make the effort. I have also learned from those who have made mistakes. I feel bad when I see that some leave this fellowship to try the old way again, but I know that I don't have to do that if I don't want to. Also, it has not been necessary for me to steal or to write any bad checks. My addiction goes way back. I was drinking abusively when I first started at 16, and I realized today that the reason for that was I was sick to begin with. I had this emotional illness, and it was very deep. I don't think that if I hadn't been emotionally ill to begin with, I would have gotten carried away with using. When it became noticeable that I was using alcohol more and more, being in the nursing profession, I tried experimenting with other drugs. It grew and became a horrible problem. Although this is certainly a suicidal path in itself, when I was aware and in a lucid moment, I did realize I was hopelessly addicted. I did not know that there was any answer. There really wasn't at that time. I was in San Francisco not knowing which way to turn when I tried suicide and was unsuccessful. I was 26 years old at that time. I now think that if it had been possible for me, I would have come to this program at that same age as a lot who are here today. My pattern, however, continued. I had lost not only my self-respect, but the respect and love of my family, my children, and my husband. I had lost my home and my profession. Somehow or other, I hadn't reached a point where I wanted to try this new way of life or to try it all the way. I just had to go on and try in my own way. I tried drugs again and was finally committed to another institution 3 times. The last time I went there, I just felt that I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't immediately connect it with my addiction. I just couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't the thought, I can't use drugs, just I can't do any more time. I just felt completely hopeless and helpless, and I didn't have any answers. All of my emotional and spiritual pride had gone. I'm sure that when I was in the institution, they doubted my sincerity in ever wanting to do anything about my problem. However, I did want to do something about it. And I know that this program doesn't work until we really do want it for ourselves. It's not for people who need it, but for people who want it. I finally wanted it so bad I knocked on doors of psychiatrists, psychologists, chaplains, and anywhere I could. I think one of my counselors, who just naturally loves all people, gave me a lot of encouragement, for I thoroughly took my first 3 steps. I admitted I was powerless over my addiction, that my life was unmanageable. I had tried so many other things, so I decided a power greater than myself could restore my sanity. To the best of my ability, I turned my life and my will over to the care of God as I understood Him, and I tried in my daily life to understand God. I had read all kinds of metaphysical books. I agreed with them and thought they were great, but I never took any action on them. I never tried any faith in my daily living. It's amazing how after I had gotten just this far, I began to get a little honesty and could see myself as I was. I doubted that I could get honest, but I became aware of myself by looking outside myself at the addicts around me, by getting to know them and understand them, by being friendly with them. I would like to give credit where credit is due, and I do believe that my daily attendance at psychotherapy groups with very understanding psychologists helped me become aware of myself so that I might do something about my problem. But when I came out, I thought, oh, can I make it outside? So many institutions took so many years out of my life that I wondered if I could stay clean and do ordinary things. I doubted whether I could go ahead with just normal living, but God has seen fit to see that I have been provided for in this last year and a half. I've been able to work regularly. I didn't have steady jobs at first, but there was never any long period in between them. Although for a time I threw out the idea of going back to my profession, which is nursing, I have since reconsidered this and am now in the process of perhaps returning to full-time nursing. With the help of some very understanding people I have met, the future here looks very bright. In the meantime, I give myself to my job every day as best I can and have been doing it successfully despite the fact that when I left the institution for the last time, everyone thought I was unemployable. To me, this is a spiritual program and the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. Without the kind of help and the therapy of one addict talking to and helping another, I know that it wouldn't have been possible for me. The obsession to use drugs has been completely removed from me during this period, and I know that it's only by the grace of God. I now give my attention to my daily problems. It's amazing, having had a pattern of fear, anxiety, resentment, and self-pity, how much of this, too, has been removed. No longer do these sway my life. I ask for help every morning, and I count my blessings every night. I'm real grateful that I don't have to go through the sickness that accompanies the taking of drugs of any kind. I think one of the biggest things that helped me here was that this is a program of complete abstinence. I got over the idea that I had a dual problem. I don't have a problem with this drug or that drug. I have a living problem, and this is all I need to think about today. I got a lot of help from my sponsor when it seemed that everyone had let me down, both family and friends. I don't know what I would have done had it not been for the doors that she opened in her letters. She shared her experience, her strength, and her hope with me, and it was very beneficial. She continues to be my very good friend. Here in NA, I have found a family, friends, and a way of life. My own family has also been restored to me through working these steps, and not through directly working on the problem. A lot of wonderful things have happened to me. I can't conceive of anything ever happening that would make me want to forget this way of life. The vicious cycle. I am Gene, and I am an addict. In writing this, I hope that I can help other addicts like myself who are trying to overcome their addiction by substituting one thing for another. That was my pattern. I started drinking whenever possible at the age of 14. With this, I added weed so that I could feel at ease and be comfortable with my surroundings and the social activities in high school. At 17, I started on heroin and quickly became addicted. After using heroin for 1.5 years, I decided to admit myself to an institution. When they accepted my application, I got scared and joined the Army after kicking at home. I thought that by being away from my environment, I would be able to solve my problem. Even here, I found myself going AWOL to get more heroin. I was then shipped to Europe and thought that if I just drank, that would be the answer. But again, I found nothing but trouble. Upon my release, I came back home to the same environment. Again, I was using heroin and various other drugs. This lasted about 2 years. The rat race really began when I tried to clean up. Cough syrup, bennies, fixes, etc. By now, I didn't know where one addiction left off and the other started. A year before I came to Narcotics Anonymous, I found myself hopelessly addicted to cough syrup, drinking 5 or 6 4-ounce bottles a day. I needed help, so I went to a doctor. He prescribed Dexedrine and would give me a shot that made me feel good. I found myself going to him practically every day. This continued for about 8 months, and I was very happy with my newfound legal addiction. I was also getting codeine from a different doctor. I now became insanely afraid and began drinking too. This went on around the clock for a month, and I ended up in a mental institution. After being released from the hospital, I thought I was free from narcotics, and now I could drink socially. I soon found out I could not. It was then that I sought help from NA. Here I learned that my real problem did not lie in the drugs that I had been using, but in a distorted personality that I had developed over the years of my using and even before that. In NA, I was able to help myself with the help of others in the fellowship. I find I am making progress and facing reality, and I'm growing a day at a time. I find new interests now that mean something, and I realize that that was one of the things which I was looking for in drugs. Sometimes I still find it difficult to face things, but I'm no longer alone and can always find someone to help me over the rough and confused spots. I have finally found people like myself who understand how I feel. I'm now able to help others find what I have, if they really want it. I thank God, as I understand Him, for this way of life. Something meaningful. I know now I am not the great leader or philosopher that I tried to make people believe I was. After 15 years of trying to live this illusion, I now find that I am being accepted for just what I really am. All my life before this, I did things my way. If anyone else ever offered advice or suggestions, I rebuffed them with a closed mind without ever trying what they had to offer to see whether it would succeed or fail. It seems that though my way always failed, I had to use again until repeated trips to jail began to convince me that something was wrong. I reached the point of desperately wanting to do something with my life that would be meaningful. I had to try something else that would work. I had found NA several years previous to this decision, but then I was not ready to change. And although I closed the door on NA on many occasions, I have always been welcome back. Since I have become willing to do something about my life with the NA program, life has been fuller and more meaningful. I could not experience life before on a daily basis without drugs. I needed these just to face each day. I know I have to alter this pattern of thinking and living if I am to stay completely clean. This I am doing through the principles of our program. Although I do not now desire or need drugs, I have to fill the void that's left with something worthwhile. I have found this in the fellowship of NA. I have to stick with the winners and go in the same direction that they go. As long as I follow the steps of the program, I know I can make it too. Although I don't find the program easy, it is simple enough for a complicated person like me to follow. I was different. My story may differ from the others you have heard, in that I was never arrested or hospitalized. I did, however, reach the point of utter despair which so many of us have experienced. It is not my track record that shows my addiction, but rather my feelings and my life. Addiction was my way of life, the only way of life I knew for many years. Thinking back, I must have taken one look at life and decided I didn't want any part of it. I came from a good old-fashioned upper-middle-class broken home. I can't remember a time when I haven't been strung out. As a small child, I found out that I could ease the pain with food, and here my drug addiction grew. I became part of the pill mania of the 1950s. Even at this time, I found it hard to take medication as directed. I figured that 2 pills would do twice as much good as 1. I remember hoarding pills, stealing from my mother's prescriptions, having a hard time making the pills last until the next refill. I continued to use in this way throughout my early years. When I was in high school and the drug craze hit, the tradition between drugstore dope and street dope was a natural. I had already been using drugs on a daily basis for nearly 10 years. These drugs had virtually stopped working. I was plagued with adolescent feelings of inadequacy and inferiority. The only answer I had was that if I took something, I was, felt, or acted better. The story of my street using is pretty normal. I used anything and everything available every day. It didn't matter what I took so long as I got high. Drugs seemed good to me in those years. I was a crusader. I was an observer. I was afraid, and I was alone. Sometimes I felt all-powerful, and sometimes I prayed for the comfort of idiocy. If only I didn't have to think. I remember feeling different, not quite human, and I couldn't stand it. I stayed in my natural state, loaded. In 1966, I think, I got turned on to heroin. After that, like so many of us, nothing else would do the thing for me. At first, I joy-popped occasionally, and then used only on weekends. But a year later, I had a habit, and 2 years later, I flunked out of college and started working where my connection worked. I used stuff and dealt, and ran for another year and a half before I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I found myself strung out and no longer able to function as a human being. During this last year of my using, I started looking for help. Nothing worked. Nothing helped. Somewhere along the line, I had gotten the telephone number of a man in NA. Against my better judgment and without hope, I made what may well be the most important phone call of my life. No one came to save me. I wasn't instantly cured. The man simply said that if I had a drug problem, I might benefit from the meetings. He gave me the address of a meeting for that night. It was too far to drive, and besides, I was kicking. He also gave me the address of another meeting a couple of days later and closer to home. I promised him I'd go and have a look. When the night came, I was deathly afraid of getting busted, and afraid of the dope fiends I would find there. I knew I wasn't like the addict you read about in books or newspapers. Despite these fears, I made my first meeting. I was dressed in a 3-piece suit, black tie, and 84 hours off a 2.5-year run. I didn't want you to know what and who I was. I don't think I fooled anybody. I was screaming for help and everybody knew it. I really don't remember much of that first meeting, but I must have heard something that brought me back. The first feeling I do remember on this program was the gnawing fear that because I'd never been busted or hospitalized for drugs, I might not qualify and might not be accepted. I used twice during my first 2 weeks around the program and finally gave up. I no longer cared whether or not I qualified. I didn't care if I was accepted. I didn't even care what the people thought of me. I was too tired to care. I don't remember exactly when, but shortly after I gave up, I began to get some hope that this program might work for me. I started to imitate some of the things the winners were doing. I got caught up in NA. I felt good. It was great to be clean for the first time in years. After I'd been around for about 6 months, the novelty of being clean wore off, and I fell off that rosy cloud I'd been riding. It got hard. Somehow I survived that first dose of reality. I think the only things I had going for me then were the desire to stay clean, no matter what, faith that things would work out okay so long as I didn't use, and people who are willing to help when I asked for help. Since then, it's been an uphill fight. I've had to work to stay clean. I found it necessary to go to many meetings, to work with newcomers, to participate in NA, to get involved. I've had to work the 12 steps the best I could, and I've had to learn to live. Today, my life is much simpler. I have a job I like, I'm comfortable in my marriage, I have real friends, and I'm active in NA. This type of life seems to suit me fine. I used to spend my time looking for the magic, those people, places, and things that would make my life ideal. I no longer have time for magic. I'm too busy learning how to live. It's a long, slow process. Sometimes I think I'm going crazy. Sometimes I think, what's the use? Sometimes I back myself into that corner of self-obsession and think there's no way out. Sometimes I think I can't stand life's problems anymore. But then this program provides an answer, and the bad times pass. Most of the time, life's pretty good, and sometimes life is great, greater than I can ever remember. I learned to like myself and found friendship. I came to know myself a little bit and found understanding. I found a little faith, and from it, freedom. And I found service and learned that this provides the fulfillment I need for happiness. Fearful mother. I thought an addict was a person who was using hard drugs, someone who was on the streets or in jail. My pattern was different. I got my drugs from a doctor or friends. I knew something was wrong, yet I tried to do right at work, in my marriage, and in raising my children. I really tried hard. I would be doing well and then I'd fail. It went on like this, and each time it seemed like forever. It seemed like nothing would ever change. I wanted to be a good mother. I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to be involved in society, yet never felt a part of it. I went through years of telling my children, I'm sorry, but this time it will be different. I went from one doctor to another asking for help. I went for counseling, feeling everything will be all right now, but the inside was still saying, what is wrong? I was changing jobs, changing doctors, changing drugs, trying different books, religions, and hair colors. I moved from one area to another, changed friends, and moved furniture. I went on vacations and also remained hidden in my home. So many things through the years, constantly feeling, I'm wrong, I'm different, I'm a failure. When I had my first child, I liked it when they knocked me out. I liked the feelings of the drugs they gave me. It was a feeling that whatever is going on around me, I don't know, and I don't care, really. Through the years, the tranquilizers gave me the feeling that nothing is really that important. Toward the end, things became so mixed up, I was not sure what was and what was not important. I was shaking inside and out. Drugs would not help. I was still trying, but very little. I had quit work and was trying to go back, but I couldn't. I would be on the couch afraid of everything. I was 103 pounds and had sores on my lips and in my nose. I had diabetes and shook so that I had a hard time putting a spoon in my mouth. I felt I was out to kill myself, and people around me were out to hurt me. Physically and mentally, I had a breakdown. I had just become a grandmother, and I could not even communicate with a small child. I was almost a vegetable. I wanted to be a part of living, but did not know how. Part of me said I'd be better off dead, and part of me said that there has to be a better way of living. When I started on the program of NA, there were a lot of people who suggested just everyday things for me to do, like eating, taking a bath, getting dressed, going for a walk, going to meetings. They told me, don't be afraid. We have all gone through this. I went to a lot of meetings through the years. One thing has stuck with me. One thing they said from the beginning. Betty, you can stop running and you can be whatever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. Since being on the program, I have listened and watched many people and have seen them go through many ups and downs. I have used the teachings I felt were best for me. My work area has had to change, and I have been going to school. I have had to relearn all the way back to the grammar school level. It has been slow for me, but very rewarding. I also decided that I need to know me better before I can have a meaningful relationship with a man. I am learning to communicate with my daughters. I am trying many things which I wanted to do for years. I am able to remember many things that I had pushed out of my mind. I have found that Betty is not that big pile of nothing, but is someone and something that I never really stopped to look at or listen to. April 1st will be my 5th NA birthday. How's that for April Fool's birthday? Fat addict. I am an addict. I used at least 50 different types of drugs on an ongoing basis for a period of 18 years. I didn't know when I started using, but I used drugs for only one reason, because I didn't like the way I felt. I wanted to feel better. I spent 18 years trying to feel different. I couldn't face the everyday realities of life. Being a fat kid, fat all my life, I felt rejected. I was born in Arizona in 1935, and I moved to California in the early 1940s. My family moved around from state to state, and my father was married several times. He was a binge drinker. Either he was in a state of self-righteousness or a state of complete degradation. This is one of the many reasons we move so often. As I moved from school to school, I would relate various experiences that I had and would talk about my various stepmothers. For some reason, I was thought to be a liar. It seemed the only company that accepted me no matter where I went was the so-called lower-level people, and I never felt that I was a lower-level person. It made me feel like I had some self-worth by being able to look down on them. My family life was confused and painful, but a lot of sound moral values were passed on to me in my upbringing. I always made the attempt to stay employed. As a matter of fact, on most occasions I managed to be self-employed in some type of business. I was even able to maintain some civic status by belonging to fraternal organizations. I was 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed 282 pounds. I ate compulsively to try and handle my feelings and emotions and to make me feel better. As a matter of fact, this is how I originally got into using heavy drugs. I wanted to lose weight so desperately that I became willing to use heroin. I thought I would be smart enough not to get hooked, that I could use and lose my appetite, feel good, and outsmart the game. I bounced around the country and ended up in penitentiaries and jails. This was the beginning of the end. Not only was I a compulsive overeater and remained fat, but I was also addicted to the drugs I was using. Somebody told me about the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous when I was in the complete stage of degradation and desperation. Having no place to go, I walked into this fellowship feeling as low as a person can feel, like there was no way out. I was completely and totally morally bankrupt. I knew nothing about spiritual values. I knew nothing about living. Life ultimately was nothing but pain on a daily basis. All I knew was to put something in me, food or drugs, or to abuse sex to feel good, which just didn't do it for me anymore. I just couldn't get enough of anything. When I came to this program, I found something that I had never experienced before. Total acceptance for who and what I was. I was invited to keep coming back to a fellowship that told me there were no fees or dues, that I had already paid my dues via my past life, and that if I kept coming back, I would find total freedom and a new way of life. Today, many years later, I find that I am free from addiction and compulsive overeating, and I have a status in the community. I have a nice home and family, an executive position, and most of all, I have a personal relationship with my God, which has made all these things possible. I am able to feel good, to feel joyful and blissful, to feel serenity, even when things are not as good as they might be. There is no question about it. I owe my life to the Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship and God. I can only extend my hope that if you too are suffering as I once was, you will practice the principles of Narcotics Anonymous and find freedom from pain and a meaningful, prosperous life.